friends, Rebecca here, the Dragon Librarian from Farmington Community Library, and Alda and I are here today to talk to you about some more books that we think were some of the best books that we read in 2022. So like I said last week, there were so many books to choose from. I read 500 books in 2022, so there was a lot to whittle down, and it was really hard to just pick a couple. So we have a few different categories that we're going to be talking about throughout this month to show you some of the amazing titles that came through. So this week we're actually going to be talking about the top 5 runners-up for best fiction of the year. So we could technically consider last week's top 5 and this week's top 5 and just say all of it as a top 10. But then that video would have been really long, which is why I broke it up from last week and into this week. So this week we're going to be talking about books 6 through 10, essentially, and what are some of the best ones of this year. So they weren't perfect enough to have made it onto the top 5 list, but they were too good to be relegated to just the rest of the books of the year, right? So they were just so absolutely incredible. Some really talented authors in there, and I want to share them with you guys too. Maybe you're looking for some new books to read this coming year, fill out some new goals that have to do with reading. So if that's the case, then these are some really great ones to start with. So talking about counting down from 5 again. So number 5, Ocean State by Stewart. Ocean State. Now this is one of those books that is very unique in that I loved it so much, but I really would have a hard time explaining why. So it's a short book. It's not very long. It's less than 300 pages. It's barely 200 pages, actually. It's like 220 pages. And it takes place in Rhode Island in the early 2000s, and basically is about this murder that takes place. But this is not a mystery book. This is not a thriller. This is basically right in the beginning of the story, you're told what happens and who does it. There's no mystery surrounding, we have to try to now track down who it was with all these clues. No, you are told right from the beginning what happened and who it was and who committed the crime. However, what unfolds after that is a really beautiful depiction of all these characters' lives and what led up to this moment. So basically what happens is a young girl is murdered, a high school girl is murdered, and the person who is narrating the story, it's her sister that did it. And she did it because her and this other girl that was killed were both in love with the same boy. And Angel, who is the name of the murderer, kills Birdie, who is the one that dies. So we get a point of view of Angel throughout the story, the events leading up to the murder. We get a point of view of Birdie throughout the story, what leads up to her death. And we get a point of view of the girl's mother as well. And we get a point of view of the sister who is narrating the story. So I just want to read you the first 2 lines of this so you see why I was completely drawn in. When I was in 8th grade, my sister helped kill another girl. She was in love, my mother said, like it was an excuse. She didn't know what she was doing. I had never been in love then, not really, so I didn't know what my mother meant, but I do now. How can you not be completely drawn in by that line, right? You just want to find out, okay, I know who it is that died, and I know who killed her, but I gotta find out why and what happened leading up to it. And this book is just beautifully written. It's a wonderful just depiction of, life in a small working class town, of teenagers. I just loved it so much. It made me super nostalgic for my high school years, even though I didn't particularly like high school. It still has that kind of writing that just evokes this feeling of nostalgia for what has passed. So I really love this book. It was something that I could not stop thinking about after I read it. So I had to make it on the runners up list. So this is number 5, Ocean State. So the next book I was really anticipating. It was one of my most anticipated books of the year because of the author, who I absolutely love. And so number 4, we're rounding it out with Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. And look at how cool that cover is. I just really love this cover. It's really simple, but also really interesting as well. So Kevin Wilson wrote the book Nothing to See Here, which is about a book, if you haven't read it, about these kids that spontaneously combust. And it was fantastic. It was hilarious and just very moving, and I absolutely loved it. So this was his new book that came out this year, and I was so excited to read it, and he did not let me down at all. I loved this so much. And much like his previous work that I read and loved, this book is simultaneously very hilarious at some parts, but also very, very serious and deals with a lot of interesting, deep topics as well. And the way he's able to go back and forth between those two feelings is just incredible. So this is about two teenage outcasts who are alone during the summer, and basically they create this art, this little poem and this art piece, and they create it together. And so they create this art piece, and then they just on a whim start hanging it up around town. They make photocopies of it, hang it up around town. They don't sign it or anything. Nobody knows who it's by. Well, then the town sort of goes into this panic. Some people think it's the government, like it's a government conspiracy, and other people think that it's something with these gang of hoodlums, and really it's just these two outcasts, these two teenage outcasts. Well, this becomes this huge, almost worldwide phenomenon where people are just talking about it, and there's all these theories about who did it. Meanwhile, the two people who actually did it do not own up to it. It's the secret kept between the two of them. So it's basically about these two people who are now grown dealing with the aftermath of having created this thing that they just blew up and is now bigger than both of them. And it's such a simple, weird kind of concept for a book, but it works so well, and it's absolutely phenomenal. There's just something about Kevin Wilson's writing that I can't help but absolutely love. It's just so, so good. So amazing and touching and heartfelt, and also super hilarious too. Like I said, he goes back and forth between those two emotions it's just wonderful to read. And this is also not a very long book. Barely over 200 pages. It's like 230 pages. So another short one that is absolutely wonderful. Now is not the time to panic. So I recommend this, and also his previous work, Nothing to See Here, if you have not read that one. Okay, we're at number 3. A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. A Tale for the Time Being. This was actually the first book I read in 2022. And I knew as soon as I finished it that it was going to be a favorite of mine, and that I was going to love it so much. And that was true. It definitely did not change, even though I read a million other books throughout the year. So this book I was really excited to read because the author wrote a book that came out the previous year, the Book of Form and Emptiness, that I absolutely loved, hands down. Another book that had made my top 5 of the year for the previous year. So I wanted to read her other works. I kind of read the synopsis of this and thought it sounded good. I had COVID at the beginning of January of last year, so I was like in this weird fevered state reading this book, but it stuck with me. Everything about it is just absolutely wonderful. So A Tale for the Time Being is sort of a play on words, because the title means a tale for the time being, like a time, but it also is referring to something called a time being, which you find out what it is when you're reading the story. So this book takes place in two very different points of view. So the first one is this writer named Ruth, who is living in the Pacific Northwest on this island. And she comes across this lunchbox that has washed ashore on the beach, and inside is the diary of this 16-year-old Japanese schoolgirl. So as she starts reading it, she discovers that this debris probably came from the tsunami that hit Japan in 2011. So she's as she's reading, trying to figure out what happened to this girl whose name is Now. She's trying to figure out, if she's still alive. And on the other hand, we're getting Now, who is the Japanese girl, writing these diary entries as the time is happening. So we've got two different time periods, two different points of view, and we're just trying to unravel this, like, what happened? Did she survive? Because basically Now is depressed as she's writing this diary. She gets bullied at school, and she's got some stuff going on at home with her dad, and she's contemplating suicide. But she figures that, before I do that, I really want to talk about this this Buddhist Zen Buddhist person and her aunt, who is in her life, that she learned a lot from, and she wants to impart her lessons on the world before she leaves. So you're racing to read this book, trying to figure out, does Now survive? Does she end up killing herself? Does she end up not making it because of the tsunami? It's such a beautiful story. There are so many intricacies to this book, between what is going on with Ruth in the present day to a few years past in the prior, where there was that tsunami. And it's just so incredible. It's also this book is very evocative in the description of the setting. So in the description of the Pacific Northwest, it is so beautifully detailed, and also the description of Japan as well, which I absolutely love. I just fell into this book and loved everything about it. Every word is a treasure of this book. Highly recommend it, and it cemented in my mind Ruth Ozeki just being a phenomenal writer. So give this one a shot. A Tale for the Time Being. All right, we're at the last two. So number 2, The Measure by Nikki Erlick. Now this book, as you might see, was a Read with Jenna book. So if you're interested in those sorts of book club things, it was one of those. And this book is absolutely one of those that it had me thinking so much while I was reading it, but those thoughts have not left. So I'm still going over some of these same thoughts that this book arose in me, and I'm still thinking about them months later, which I think is a really good hallmark of a great book. So what is this book about? So this is a book that is about the world changing in a very dramatic way, and that is, one morning everybody gets up, and everybody over the age of 21 has received a little box. No note on it, no sign of where it came from. No matter where you lived or who you are, if you're over the age of 21, you received a little box. And when you open the box, there's a length of string. Now, what is determined in the coming weeks is that the length of string is a 100% accurate telling of when you are going to die. So if you have a short string in that box, you know your time is limited. If you have a longer string in the box, you know that your time is longer. And over the coming months and coming years, scientists are able to determine to the day of the length of people's strings when they are going to die. So one thing I want to say real quick that I really liked about this book is that it does not go into the how or why this happened. They do not definitively answer, where did these strings come from? How are they here? They don't go into any of that, because that's not the point of this book. This is not supposed to be a science fiction story about, either an alien or a religious thing that brought these strings to be. It's nothing to do with that. The point of this book is to make you think, what would I do if this happened to me? And I think about this all the time. So this book follows a cast of characters who wake up this day and get these strings, and then it's basically all about them living their lives after that. How do you cope with this? If you know exactly when you are going to die, what do you do with that? What do you do with that knowledge? If you woke up and you knew, I have 2 days left, what do you do with that time? And adversely, if you wake up and you know, I have 50 years left, what do you do with that time? How does that change the way you live? And those are the questions that are brought up in this book and just make it absolutely so incredible. So yes, this is definitely a story of these characters and how they cope and survive and what they do with their loved ones and how everything turns out, and finding love when they didn't think they would, and some relationships ending, and all kinds of things with family. So of course this is an amazing book in terms of the characters, but really what I loved about it was just these really great thoughts, these really great things that it leaves you with. And like I said, I'm still thinking about it today. It's beautifully written. What a great story. Highly, highly recommend it. The Measure. Okay, so we're down to the wire now. We're down to the #1 book of the runners up list, right? For best adult fiction of 2022. Are you ready? Okay. And that book is The Cloisters by Katie Hayes. Now, this is a very biased personal choice on my part, mostly because I am obsessed with the subgenre of dark academia, and this book is rife with it. So that's one reason why it definitely made it so high up on the list. The second reason why it made it so high up on the list, I'll tell you in a moment. So dark academia is a subgenre of fiction that is very loosely based on a lot of characteristics, but most of the time, to describe it quickly, it's a book that's set either at like a school, a university, or a museum or something like that, involving a close-knit group of people who have very intense, unhealthy relationships. There's usually a murder, there's usually a ghost, there's something along those lines. Now, those stories of dark academia don't have to have all of those components, but they usually will have at least one of them. And it's basically just a story that has like an academic vibe to it, but something is off and sinister. So I really, really will just read anything that is in that subgenre because I love it so much. So I was very excited to get my hands on this, and it was phenomenal. It did not let me down. It is a bit of a mystery as well. There is a murder involved, and it's basically about this girl who is growing up on the West Coast. She's going to school, college. Her father dies. She kind of loses her way. She gets a internship at the Cloisters, which is a part of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. So she goes there and she becomes involved in this group of curators who are obsessed with the occult and with this pack of tarot cards that are really old and the story that goes with them. So there is a murder that happens. There is, like I said, these friendships that are just very intense, and she bonds with her fellow internee and with the person who's running the department, and things just start to get a little bit out of hand. And watching everything structurally in order just start to slowly descend into chaos is just so incredible and very fulfilling. And like I said, it's got a really great mystery to it as well, and the ending is just so explosive, and wow, the ending is incredible. I loved it so much. So the other reason why I really love this book and rated it so highly is because of the setting. So like I said, and like it says in the title, it takes place at the Cloisters, which is part of the Met. I love the Cloisters. I used to live in New Jersey. I went to New York City all the time, and the Cloisters particularly were a favorite haunt of mine. I loved it there so much. It's not located at the same location as the Met. It's a little bit farther away. It's a little bit more secluded, and it deals with a lot of medieval. So the unicorn tapestries, if you've heard of them, are there. There's lots of these plants, and just it's amazing. It's such an amazing place, and I don't know that I've ever read a book that was centered around it before, so it was really great to read about. So if it's not someplace that you've been, it might spark your interest in wanting to go there and visit, because it is worth it. It is absolutely an amazing place. So my number one book of the runners-up for adult fiction, The Cloisters. If you love a good mystery, if you love untangling puzzles, if you love dark academia, if you just love good writing and really interesting, super flawed characters, give this one a shot. The Cloisters. Well, that's what we've got for you guys today. I'm really excited to hopefully talk with you guys about these books. If you see any that you really liked, if you want to check them out, they are all available from Farmington Community Library. And then talk to me about them, see what you liked. Also, leave a message if there's one that you think I should have talked about, but I didn't, and tell me why. I'd love to know what some of your favorite books of 2022 are. And we'll be back next week with another category of the best of 2022. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and have a wonderful rest of the day.